Oh, Freunde, nicht diese Tone, sondern lass uns Himmel einstimmen. Du. Und Freuden, Oliver, da. Guten Tag. Hello, everybody. This is Walter Katz with Independence News. Uh, Today I'm going to be reacting to Zach and Gavin here on the Vanguard. On Krystal and Kyle and friends, not on the Vanguard. I'm watching the Vanguard boys on KKNF. And I guess Krystal has to leave, so it's just going to be Kyle in the Vanguard. So even better, it's just my favorite people. Sorry, Krystal. You're my next favorite after those three. Alright.
Zach and Gavin of the Vanguard, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, we're super excited, and you're dressed in all on theme for the Barbie premiere this weekend. Holy shit, it's so good to be here with a real life Ken doll.
You know, it's funny. Who plays Ken? Who is it? Like Ryan Gosling?
I think it's Ryan Gosling, man.
Ken from Barbie. I'm just looking it up right now because I want to see who pulls off the blonde better.
You're a dead ringer.
Let's see. When I type in Ken from Barbie, I just see literal Ken doll. Oh, there he is. There he is. There's Ryan Gosling. No, I think I pull it off better. I think he looks a little smug. I think the six pack is overkill.
You beat him to the punch. You've been paying your dues for a while now.
Bro, let me tell you, I've seen like 5 or 6 people after me do it, and I'm like, I don't know, I kind of got there first. Like, everybody sort of bite my style a little bit.
Honestly, ahead of the curve.
Nah, your black hair was
That's what I do, man. That's what I do.
Yeah, that's
so.
Hilarious.
Anyway, it's great to talk to you guys. Really happy to have you here with me today. And we were talking the other day, and there was a list of some issues that we were both interested in getting into. So we got Marianne, RFK, Cornel West, the Republican primary, and Justice Democrats, which has been in the news recently. So let's start with Marianne, because I know that you guys are, if I'm considered like the chief Marianne supporter among the online left, you guys are like right there behind me, or if not, maybe even surpassing me a little bit. So what are your thoughts on her campaign and how everything's going?
Yeah, sure. So again, thanks so much for having us on, Kyle. Really excited to get into a lot of this electoral politics with you. And yeah, Marianne Williamson has proven to be a really interesting candidate. She's the candidate that I'm supporting in the Democratic Party primary. I think she's the most progressive candidate in that primary, the candidate whose platform most aligns, honestly, with Bernie Sanders, who, of course, I supported in 2016 and 2020. So the reason why I am a supporter of Marianne Williamson is just really that simple. She supports progressive politics that I also support. And honestly, there's not much competition right now, at least as far as the Democratic Party primary goes. Not terribly impressed by RFK Jr. And obviously, I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden. Didn't do that last time. Not going to do it this time. So yeah, I think she's the most progressive candidate in the Democratic primary. But if she doesn't win the Democratic primary, then I am excited to probably vote for Cornel West in the general election, assuming that he does win the Green Party primary, which I think he basically has on lock. So yeah, that's what I would say about that. It's been interesting tracking Marianne's campaign. It's kind of been one of Zach and I's beat over on the Vanguard. We've kind of followed it since the beginning. Had her on a couple times, had on various people from the staff. We've reported on some of the bumps in the road as she's, lost campaign managers and tried to recover from that. So it's definitely been a bit of a rough campaign so far, I think. It remains to be seen if Marianne Williamson's going to be able to pull it off. But I think that, every campaign has its ups and downs. And so far, I've been, for the most part, pretty impressed with hers.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to piggyback onto that. And I think that one of the things that was really important about the Marianne Williamson campaign that was something that Gavin and I really, latched onto from jump was the fact that she was willing to do it. She was the one that was willing to get in the race first and say, hey, guys, somebody needs to challenge Joe Biden. Somebody needs to introduce these progressive policies back to the mainstream. The people want it. The people deserve it. And we need to have somebody that's going to go out there and make that case. And that was before there was Cornel West. That was before there was RFK-J, who we can get into later because we have a lot of thoughts on him as well. But this was somebody who said, look, Joe Biden has failed the American people. And I hope for the best, or, this is Marianne speaking, obviously. She hoped for the best from, Joe Biden. She, turned around and supported him in 2020 after, she lost in the Democratic primary 3 years ago. But she said, frankly, his work was inadequate, and I agreed with that. And yeah, she had a very extensive, plan. It really did mirror that of the Bernie Sanders campaign, right? One of the things we talked about a lot in the 2020 race is how Bernie Sanders redefined the expectations for policy on your campaign website, right? This is not a website that's filled with platitudes. We're going to be better together, and let's fix this, America. And we're not a party, we're a movement of people and stuff. No, it has actual solutions to the problems that people are recognizing all around them. And I was really inspired by that. On top of the fact that I just think that, Marianne Williamson is a very empathetic, very powerful speaker. So I was really enthused by, her ability to kind of get that all started. Obviously, there have been some bumps in the road that Gavin alluded to. Our good friend of the show, Carlos Cardona, has taken over as campaign manager. So we're excited to see where it goes from here. I would love to see Marianne Williamson get on the debate stage with Joe Biden and RFK-J and really kind of beat home the fact that, she is the best representation of the Democratic Party as most Democratic Party voters want it to be, as most Democratic Party voters envision it. I think she is the moderate for the party. I think she's a great bell ringer. I think Gavin and I have talked about the fact that, she might not be as radical on some issues that Gavin and I are, but I think if you take her and you compare her to obviously any of the two other options, but basically anybody else that you could imagine running in a Democratic Party primary, I think that she really does hit down the middle in a way that a progressive like me or Gavin or you, Kyle, could vote for her in that primary, but also somebody who, is a little bit removed from politics. They're not going to be startled away from her, again, in a way that's her own, but kind of echoes that Bernie Sanders, not intimidating, but inviting, Democratic Party politics.
So, Gavin, you made an interesting point about Biden that I want to get back to later. And I also want to, you guys both touched on RFK a little bit, which we could talk about later. But before we get to that, so here's my kind of difficult question. I'm not even sure I have an answer for it, but we see where she's at in the polls. She's kind of just treading water. Depending on what poll you look at, it's between 6% and 9%, which is not bad. I mean, the fact that we have an incumbent Democratic president and you have one candidate who's at 17% in RFK and one that's at about 9% in Marianne Williamson, it's not nothing, right? But at the same time, what should she do to get more attention, garner more support? Because we are at this point now where there's been a little bit of a plateau effect. And it's a massive uphill climb. So in this theoretical world here, we're going to say that both of you are her campaign manager, and she's going to listen to whatever advice that you give her. What would you tell her to do in order to get more eyeballs, get more support, etc.?
Are you going to tell her?
All right, I'll take this one. So one of the things that we often point out and draw parallel to, and I know you'll probably know more about this and remember it better than we do, Kyle, because we were listening to you when this was happening, unfolding. Back in 2015, right, the big thing that broke, this was Gavin and I's senior year of high school, and nobody would shut the fuck up about Bernie Sanders after the nurses union endorsement. It was it became overnight. It was this guy has a real shot. This guy could be the dude that, does it. Could he take on Hillary? When did that happen? I think we looked at it. It was August, right? It was right when school was starting, senior year. I remember I was in my AP Gov class with shout out to Stu Stern. But anyway, that was a big tide turning moment, right? Because this was a guy that couldn't be denied. It was just everybody. It was just it went without saying that every union was going to endorse Hillary because she was going to be the Democratic Party nominee. Like, she was going to be coronated, right? It was it was a matter of time. It was like a foregone conclusion. And when the nurses union said, actually, no, we believe in Medicare for all. We are nurses because we want to take care of people. We want to raise. We are part of the backbone of this country. We are a union, and we're with this guy because he's had our back, for decades. That really changed the game. And obviously you can't manufacture that overnight. But I think that if there was one piece of advice that I would give to the Marianne Williamson campaign, it would be just bust your ass to get some union support, because that is going to draw a firm line between the kind of media portrayal that is going to be tried to hoist on her. Oh, she's just the the wine mom candidate. They try and make her look ditzy. They do every sexist ploy in the book, and they like excuse it for some reason because she's like a fringe candidate, right? But if you have the blue collar union guys standing behind you, I'm not saying it has to be the union, the Teamsters, right? The nurses union. It could be the Teamsters, right? Look at the moment that we have going on right now. We have a potential massive UPS Teamster strike, 300,000 members strong. We have the WGA strike. We have the SAG strike going on right now. I think that if she could, kind of use her leverage to get involved in those things, get on TV with Fran Drescher and talk about how, yes, the SAG strike matters, right? These actors are workers too, right? And we can all see them and we can all support them. And this makes it easier for other unions to grow. I think that's got to be the lane, because I think that it creates more validity. It makes her undeniable as like a credible, serious candidate that's willing to work to uplift the working class. And it also dispels any of the whole like unrelatable, fringe wealth, conspiracy theory notices. Like, no, dude, nothing's more boots on the ground than unions. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Zach. If I had to add something, I would tell Marianne, if I was her campaign manager, and honestly, this might already be her strategy to some extent, but I would just say go all in on New Hampshire and basically screw everything else. Like, don't campaign in South Carolina. I heard Andrew Yang was talking about doing campaign events for her in South Carolina. I don't even know why she would campaign in South Carolina. Obviously, Joe Biden's going to win that state. If I were her team, I would just go all in on New Hampshire. And if there's any chance at all of her winning the New Hampshire primary, if Joe Biden's not on the ballot, that's their golden ticket. Not that that would guarantee her the nomination, but if they have any chance in hell of actually giving Joe Biden a run for his money in this primary, I think Marianne's going to have to come out of the gate strong, winning New Hampshire. And then we'll see if that momentum can carry forward into the other 49 states. But yeah, I would just go all in on New Hampshire, to be honest, in addition to really, really trying hard to court some union support.
Can I ask you guys a question?
Go ahead. I was gonna comment on that too, but I'll come back to it. Go ahead.
The only thing I wanted to add was, do you guys think that it's even possible in this day and age to do that, state by state strategy, or will they just throw such an astronomical amount of money into ads in every single state after New Hampshire that it just becomes impossible for Marianne to ever, even be seen on any mainstream media, just complete blackout?
If she wins New Hampshire, it's going to be really hard for them to black that out. That'll be huge news,
Well, remember, Bernie kind of won the first three contests. And then between Biden winning South Carolina and all of the centrists dropping out and endorsing Biden, that was sort of the knife in his back that they twisted. So it is theoretically possible to have a really banger first three states and then just shit the bed. So
totally. We see that all the time with the Republicans too.
Yeah. So all right, I got a couple thoughts here. So on the South Carolina thing, I understand why you'd make that argument, especially seeing, Bernie do abysmally in South Carolina. It's why waste your time? Why waste your money and your resources? It's not worth it. But at the same time, Marianne in particular, throughout her career, she's gotten a lot of support from Black women in particular. And so I think the reception that she gets in South Carolina is honestly different and a little better than what Bernie got there. So that's one point. So I wouldn't totally write off South Carolina. I still think it's unlikely for her to do well there. But I wouldn't totally write it off. As far as the unions go, I think it's a good idea to get union support because, union support is always welcome and we're pro-union, and it does sort of make her seem more like, I'm looking out for blue collar workers. The idea of being like this liberal elitist sort of gets washed away on that front. But there's another problem in that a lot of unions have already come out and endorsed Joe Biden, which obviously I don't think they should have done that. In the same way, I don't think any of the so-called progressives in Congress should have done that. And they did too, unfortunately, many of them. So then that leaves us, and this is what I've been struggling with thinking about her campaign too. It's like, so what the hell do we actually do? I think the advice you give is good. Are those going to be like breakthrough things? And then look, it all comes back to me. Like, I can't get away from this thought. Modern day politics is just like a circus now, right? Like, Trump is leading by a gazillion points in the Republican primary. Why? Because he's the show. He's the circus, and he's a showman. And he also triggers the liberals, and the liberals are obsessed with him. And then he's under like 47 different indictments, which in any other era, it'd be like, oh, you're done. Get out of here. But in the modern day era, it's like, as long as you're triggering the liberals, as long as you're triggering the other side, then the conservatives are going to absolutely love you. And you're getting indicted. Okay, well, the people are going to think there's a witch hunt against you, so you go up even more in the polls.
People are fed up
and
with
so
that shit.
I don't know how to like
I am.
harness this dynamic and sort of replicate it on the Democratic side with Marianne, or if that's even possible, if Democratic voters react like Republican voters. But I mean, my instinct is I like the advice you guys gave her, but I would also tell her, like, first of all, say yes to almost every interview that, somebody comes to you say, hey, will you do this show or that show? I would say yes to almost every single one of them. Beyond that, I would say be way more aggressive in terms of rhetoric. Yeah. And then I'd also say, like, you got to start, like, I like how when she went on Fox News a bunch of times and she like fought with Sean Hannity and stuff like that. I think that negative polarization, even though it's overall like a bad thing, I don't think it's a healthy thing. I think it's unavoidable that you need some of that in order to like actually gain the popularity among your own party and eventually win the primary. So like going on Fox News and fighting Sean Hannity, going on Fox News and fighting Jesse Waters, going on, Maria Bartiromo show and fighting with her, having a moment go viral. Like, I think these are things that ultimately would help her in the long run. I think those are sort of like her best moments.
Yeah, no, I do totally agree with that. And I do actually think it's more of a Republican Party right-wing thing, that phenomena you mentioned, Kyle, where they're so attracted to just like the craziest candidate, the circus candidate. I mean, I just don't, unfortunately, honestly, kind of see that replicated on the left as much, or on the Democratic side, which isn't always the left, but you know what I mean. I think that goes for like where they get their news from too. A lot more right-wingers, in my opinion, seem to be a lot more comfortable just getting their news from YouTube hosts and, random people online that have opinions, which I don't have any problem with. I mean, that's what literally Zach and I do for a living. It seems like Democrats, lefties tend to have more of a bias towards like establishment voices, or not even necessarily establishment, but just voices that are like quote unquote serious or like taken seriously. And the same goes with presidential candidates. So I don't think that like a character like Trump would even have any success on the Democratic Party side, like the same way he was able to on the Republican side. But who knows, right? Maybe someone would be able to come along and really kind of like capitalize on that brash populist energy.
So I saw an interesting poll that Krystal actually sent it to me the other day. It had all like the candidates on the Democratic side as well. I'm just going to ask you to take a wild guess, just a stab in the dark here. What do you think RFK's favorability rating is among Democratic voters? You're going to love this fact.
Gavin, you made me go first last time. You gotta get out there first this time.
Just take a wild guess.
I'm not going to
not going to hold it against you. Just
I know that it's going to be higher with Republicans than Democrats. What is it in the negatives?
No, but it's 9%. He has a 9%.
I was going to say 23.
He has a 9%. See, I would have guessed something like that too, like 23, 32, something like that. He has a 9% favorability rating among Democratic voters. So
that's why I don't think he's a real threat, though. That's why I don't think he's a real threat, though, because he's literally just got nobody that's going to participate in the Democratic Party primary is falling for his schlock, right? It's a bunch of people who, watch dubious programming on the internet, right? That gives them some, misinformation about, certain things like vaccines and, the New World Order and all. I mean, we could get into the anti-Semitic crazy shit that he was saying a few days ago. That's just not going to work with Democratic primary voters, much to what Gavin said, right? They're more than the Republicans, right? There is a certain subsect of Republicans, like my mother, where, you know, it's like the flag over everything and like the veneer of the greatness of America and like stuff like that, right? But most of the Republican Party has shred that to pieces, right? But the Democrats, as Gavin was pointing to, they're still married to the mirage. They're still married to the pomp and circumstance. They want all the mythology. They want all the pageantry, right? And so when you see a guy like RFKJ, that would humiliate them. They would never, ever, 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 ever get behind a guy like RFKJ. Which is why I think it's crazy that he's still showing up at like 18 or 19% in these polls, because these are clearly not likely Democratic voters. Not to just hijack the wheel for a second there, but I think it's crazy.
No, I mean, the thing that he doesn't understand, and apparently Dennis Kucinich, who's his campaign manager, who was not a bad politician when he was a politician, but
actually a good person, he seemed.
Yeah, exactly. What they're not understanding is, in order to win a Democratic primary, you also need normie Democratic voters. So RFK, even though I agree that like Fauci is a fraud, potentially a criminal, right? Like he pushed what's it called? The research into the
gain of function
research. I don't know why I was blanking on that randomly, but yeah, like and that potentially could have led to, you know, COVID getting out, whatever. Like all that's true. But he wrote a whole book about how like Fauci is a demon. And you're running in a Democratic primary where like 80% of the voters deify Fauci. So I just don't understand, like, why even pick this primary? Like, he's literally running in the wrong primary. He's doing the right-wing podcast circuit, and everybody's jerking each other off and sucking each other off. He was talking about Elon Musk, like, oh, Elon, you're a hero. You're so amazing, Elon. And then you're running as a Democrat. Like, you think that's going to work, homie? It's not going to come close to working. Yeah. So you're right. The numbers that they're getting, it's not likely Democratic voters, because among likely Democratic voters, Marianne Williamson is definitely going to eclipse RFK at one point or another, because she's actually more on the left and appeals not just to the actual left and independent left-leaning voters, but also to some normie Democrats.
Yeah. See, the thing about RFK, it's kind of like Tulsi Gabbard. He's actually a more valuable commodity to the right-wing media if he's pretending to be a Democrat. If he's like, oh, no, I am a Democrat, and all the other ones have gone crazy. That's why I need to, you know, challenge Joe Biden and save this party or whatever. And then the Republicans worship that. They love that. Again, we saw the exact same thing with Tulsi Gabbard, who eventually did just become a Republican or maybe an independent. I don't know if she's officially a Republican yet, but we all know that she actually is, right? So I think that's an interesting aspect of it. I also think it's interesting how RFK, like, he will own some of the most controversial stances, like for example, his one on vaccines. That's undeniably an incredibly controversial stance that's out of the mainstream, out of the medical mainstream, all that stuff. And he'll own that. You know, to his credit, he'll go on podcasts and debate his stance. I genuinely think it's something he believes in. I don't know how he could spend so much time focused on it if it wasn't something he believed in. But then when it comes to other statements, like when he said, you know, Roger Waters is a hero, as soon as there's a little bit of media backlash, he immediately comes out and deletes it and apologizes and starts, you know, begging for forgiveness from AIPAC. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that one time Roger Waters supported BDS. Never mind, delete it. It's like, how can you have so much bravery to stand up for your controversial take on vaccines, which happens to be a dog shit take, by the way, but then have a correct stance on something that's also controversial, but not be able to have any principles there? I find it all very weird. And yeah, I think it's very, very notable how seemingly the only people that he's interacting with, going on their shows and you know, being endorsed by or getting a lot of enthusiasm from, are all right wingers. This guy's going on fucking Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, like every right wing hack podcast in the fucking book. And it really is bizarre. It's like, do you not know which primary you're running in? Do you not know which voters listen to these shows you're going on? I think it does give people reason to wonder if he has another goal in mind, like a third party or independent run, or if he's trying to, you know, get in the Trump administration, or if there's another calculus at work here. Because yeah, obviously he's not appealing to Democratic Party voters. Obviously he's not going to be able to beat Joe Biden, appealing to the kind of voters that he's appealing to right now.
So what you forgot, Gavin, is that he can actually bench 4 plates with his shirt off. So let's not discount the man's credentials for presidency.
Which, by the way, he admitted he's on testosterone replacement therapy, which for those of you who don't know is literally legal steroids, which for those of you who don't know is made by Big Pharma, which for those of you who don't know is the main target of his ire. But let me react to that. Go ahead.
No, that's what I've always thought was so funny is all the vaccine skeptic dudes. They're like, I don't know, bro. All I do is eat elk meat and inject steroids, bro. But keep that vaccine away from me, bro. I don't know what's in there. And it's just like, okay, dude. Like, I get that, a little inconsistent there. You get the juice from the same guy that makes the jab. So,
well, listen,
it's an interesting what I never
understood. What I never understood about the anti-vax types is that they're so hesitant about this one thing. Oh, don't get that near me. Don't put it in my body. My body's pure. I want to keep it that way. You're crazy. Stay away from me. The second one of them actually gets COVID, they throw the kitchen sink at it. They're like, give me literally everything you have. Give me the monoclonal antibodies. Give me remdesivir. Give me this drug. Give me that drug. And it's like, bro, if you just had this same mentality of like, I'm going to try to fight this thing however I can. If you just have that same mentality before you get COVID too, that's what it is when people take the vaccine. And of course, the evidence is overwhelming that it protects you from severe illness, hospitalization, and death. It's so fucking selective, and that's what drives me crazy. It crosses the line from being like, I'm skeptical of big pharma to I'm skeptical of modern medicine. And then ironically, these are the same people who will act like alternative medicine cranks are telling the truth, when honestly, alternative medicine, these people are even bigger ripoffs than big pharma. For all my issues with big pharma, the problem with big pharma is the profit motive. It's not that the stuff doesn't work, because it does work.
It's not the scientific method.
Right. You actually have rigorous studies that go into this thing. And that's why every time you see a pharma commercial on TV, which, by the way, shouldn't exist. We shouldn't have pharma commercials on TV. But they have to list all the fucking side effects because they test the shit out of it. Whereas with some shit you get from, alternative medicine people, my dad is dead because of an alternative medicine bullshit crank. A guy who, for people who don't know, chiropractic medicine is this idea like, people who understand it properly know it's like a glorified back cracker. That's what a chiropractor is. But there's this theory behind it, back to the origin of it, where they said, no, the reason why you have any illness you've ever had is because your spine is not aligned straight. And so it's called subluxation theory is what they call it. And it's like, oh, we need to align your spine right so you don't get sick. And my dad kept going to one of these people when he had severe back pain, and they said, keep coming back. We're going to work that out. We're going to fix it. The pain he was feeling in his back was a fucking tumor. And then by the time he went to a real doctor, it was too late. He had stage 4 cancer. So that's what you get from alternative medicine assholes. You have people who are like, hey, keep coming to me. Keep paying me, buddy. We'll take care of that. And at the end of the day, it's just smoke and mirrors. It's a mirage. They're not actually helping you. They're shaking you down. So I have very little tolerance for people who don't accept anything about modern medicine and science, but they'll hawk the most insane fake cures imaginable because, hey, this is what they are trying to keep this truth from you. It's like, no, you're just a sucker and you fell for it.
Right. Also, something I've noticed with a lot of the anti-vaxxers, and this is kind of a trajectory that I predicted at the outset of all of this like anti-vax boom, back in like 2021 or whenever they rolled that out. It seemed like a lot of people at first were like, oh, no, I'm skeptical of this one, but I'm obviously not anti-vax. Like, duh, we all think anti-vaxxers are stupid, of course. But then a couple of years go by and they start listening to more and more right-wing media. This Jimmy Dore specifically, I think this applies to. And now all of a sudden he is full anti-vax. Like, literally
he was
all
also
vaccines.
He was also doing climate change denial stuff
Denial,
recently.
yeah. The Schiller
I don't know if you guys
Institute
caught
crap.
that. Listen,
yes, I did.
And this is maybe a problem with me and the way I view the world, but I make the mistake of giving people the benefit of the doubt too much and accepting them at face value. So for the longest time, my perception of him was, yeah, he's gone overboard. Yeah, he's going too far. But you know what? Ultimately, he is on the left and attacking Democrats from the left. But then as time went on, that became a less and less viable position. And the reality started to be, no, I think you're playing to your fucking audience, son.
Yeah.
I think you're telling them exactly what they want to hear. Because he knows climate change. He knows climate change is real. He knows that.
Oh, yeah.
On vaccines, he may have actually been convinced that the anti-vax position is correct because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and he's probably reading a lot of shitty sources, right? Fair enough. But you know that climate change is real, and you're out there doing anti-climate change stuff now. It's just so sad. It's just playing to the audience. It's pathetic.
Yeah, no, 100%. I don't know if you know what the Schiller Institute is, but they seem to be one of the chief kind of like propaganda machines that's spreading this line that people like Jimmy Dore and Jackson Hinkle keep repeating about climate change, RFK Jr. as well. And it's really, really weird to see it happen. But yeah, I totally agree with that, Kyle. And yeah, going back to the vaccine thing, it's just so wild to see people who at first were like, oh yeah, no, obviously I'm pro-vax. I just have suspicions about this one because of the like the mRNA technology. It's more experimental, whatever. But then slowly but surely, they just literally do become full-on anti-vaxxers who, again, we all agreed 2 or 3 or 4 years ago were total morons.
Yeah, and
yeah.
RFK is he's one of the old school anti-vaxxers from like the
Right.
late 90s and early 2000s. And a lot of those claims have been so colossally debunked. All you need is one fucking Google search of anything he says to fact check the shit out of it. We had this guy on the show not that long ago, Dr. Wilson, who went like super nuanced and detailed with a fine-tooth comb through some of RFK Jr.'s comments on Joe Rogan's show. And literally every single fucking claim. You just Google it, and it's like, this is not even close to correct. Like, he's super wrong. When Krystal interviewed him the first time and was sort of holding him accountable a little bit and pushing against him a little bit, he made this claim, and then after the show, he was like, oh, I'll send you the source. I'll send you the source for it. So he sends Krystal the source. The claim was something like, people who get the vaccine actually have COVID at a higher rate than people who don't get the vaccine. So after the show, he sends Krystal the source. Krystal reads not even the full study, just the abstract of the study. The very next line is, when you control for all the factors you're supposed to control for, which is like age, obesity, pre-existing conditions, etc., it's the exact opposite. It's obviously you get a lot of protection from getting the vaccine. So at this point, it's like, I don't know. Are you just a fucking idiot? Or are you lying on purpose? Because your own fucking source that you just sent Krystal says the exact opposite of the thing you said it said. So what is it? Is it malicious? Is it nefarious? Or are you just a fucking idiot?
What I think it is, Kyle, is I think that what has happened, and look, I'm not trying to play armchair psychologist, right? But I'm going to, right? Because I do like that. RFKJ was the ultimate rich boy Nepo baby, okay? And I think that's how you have to understand him, bro. Like, he is in love with his own life story. The dude will not shut the fuck up about how,
oh, these are Kennedy people and these are your people and these people belong to you and you're going to govern them and you're going to...
like, but he never accomplished anything, right? He never did anything with his own life. He pretended that he was an environmental activist for a while, but really he just lived off the millions and his inheritance and the clout that comes with the Kennedy name in America, right? So what is he doing now that he's old? He's realizing that his life is, kind of at the end of its rope. He hasn't accomplished anything. He's never lived up and amounted to the grand visions that he had of himself, where he is walking amongst the likes of his uncle JFK and his father Bobby Kennedy, right? And I think that that's why he won't shut the fuck up about it. And he has to feel like he's like breaking news. He has to feel like he's doing something legendary, something historical. So he's fully concentrated on this vaccine issue. And he cannot be confronted with the truth because he refuses to believe it, because it's what his entire identity, it's what his entire worldview is staked on, right? And so what is he doing now? He's indulging himself by going on to all of these podcasts. And the people that are hosting those shows, they know that he's playing a role. Look at how even the Democrats agree with us. Vote for our guy, not this guy. The Democrats agree with us, though. All the good Democrats agree with us. And here's RFK. Look, he's a Kennedy. He agrees with us, right? So he's going on there and he's playing this very specific role to them. But to him, he's on here and he's breaking news to everybody. He's awakening the world. He's leading them towards something greater. And it's only him, and I just think he's built up this huge fantasy, right? And we've seen that that's what running for president is now in this country, right? Donald Trump had his own distorted fantasy. He had his own distorted hubris, his own, just extreme narcissism and self-confidence. And obviously, name recognition and a bunch of money. And I think that this is just kind of the extension of that. So I think that it is actually just extreme self-delusion and extreme narcissism that gives you a guy like RFKJ, because I don't think that he means to come out and be nefarious. I think that, he's just living in such a distorted worldview that he's actively being harmful. I don't mean to excuse any of the wrong commentary that he's, peddled and, potentially the damage that he's caused with that. But I really think it is just a byproduct of his own delusions and the fact that, that's where it's taken him.
So when he came out the other day and he said the thing about actually there's some evidence that maybe for Ashkenazi Jews and for the Chinese, COVID affects them much less severely than it affects everybody else. And there's bioweapon research and it's happening everywhere. It was happening in Ukraine and that's what Russia was afraid of this. And he did this whole spiel. And then, I don't know who clipped it out and I think it was New York Post, actually. They ran the video and then there was this big outcry over it or whatever. And honestly, I'm not going to lie to you guys. When I first saw that video, my first thought was, I don't even know if this is going to make my show, because I would like expect him to say some shit like this. Like, this is already, like, we've already been through 7 things that are relatively similar to this, and like, I don't feel like doing the groundwork and going into the details or whatever. It's like, here's why this is idiotic, etc. So I was like, I don't even think I'm going to cover this. But then his reaction to it, to the scandal, made me like, oh, now I have to fucking cover this. Because his reaction to it, that statement he released was like, I'm not an anti-Semite, and we need unconditional support of Israel, and definitely no new Iran deal. I was like, you idiot. You were just doing your standard, like, RFK Jr. tap dance, right? This is stuff that I would expect you to say on a Tuesday before lunch. And then somehow you veered the car into the ditch even more by acting like, and by the way, I'm also really, really wrong on foreign policy. Definitely don't make peace with Iran. Definitely don't do that. And let Israel get away with ethnic cleansing. That's my real position on this. And I was like, oh, fuck, now I have to cover this. Now he's making it so I have to.
Yeah. I said on the Vanguard that I thought his apology was actually more offensive than the original comments themselves.
That's right. Yeah.
And also I have just recorded an interview with the great Rabbi Shmuley, whom the same New York Post just called this month the most famous rabbi in America. Like, oh, just so you know, I am known to hang out with the most famous rabbi in the country. I don't know if you should be calling me anti-Semitic or anything like that. Also, yeah, I'm against the Iran deal. That's, so I guess I'm actually worse than Joe Biden in that regard, although you can't give Biden much credit either, but at least he pretended to be in favor of getting back in the Iran deal, right? So, yeah, pretty fucking crazy.
So let's earlier you mentioned something, Gavin, that I thought was really interesting. You were talking about definitely voting for Marianne in the Democratic primary, which obviously I fully agree with. And then you were saying in the general, definitely voting for Cornel West. So the point that I've made on my show, and kind of the point that I've made over the years, even in 2016 and even in 2020, even though some people like interpret what I've said differently, my point has always been, if you live in a safe state, I think you should vote for, the Green Party candidate or whichever candidate 100% aligns more with your values. But I actually think it's a much more difficult moral conundrum in a swing state. I actually don't think it's a very easy question. Like, I'm definitely going to vote for Cornel West, because at the end of the day, look, it's just the ironclad reality that if we don't get rid of first past the post voting, and if we don't implement ranked choice voting, all the third party talk, whether it's a libertarian, green, an independent, or anybody, it all comes to like, it's literally for nothing. It's all just like a fake virtue signal show. And I actually think that sort of like delegitimizes the idea of a third party and a candidate who's not a Democrat or a Republican a lot more, that we all buy into this charade that there might be something serious going on here. Now, this, by the way, is coming from somebody, I voted for Jill Stein in 2012. In 2016, I, of course, voted for Bernie in the primary. And then in the general, I voted for, I think Jill Stein ran again. I think I voted for her again. So I voted for Jill Stein twice. So this is coming from somebody who is literally a Green Party voter. I've probably voted for more Green Party people than Democrats, or it's like roughly even. But having said that, like, so let me give you my whole spiel on Biden, because I'm from New York. I'm still technically registered to vote in New York, but I might be going to Virginia, which is a little bit more of a swing state. It's not as safe as New York. So then all of a sudden this conundrum pops up again. So when it comes to Biden, I got to be honest with you guys. I expected Dickie McGee's acts from him. I expected literally nothing, because we're talking about a guy who voted for the Iraq War. We're talking about a guy who voted for the crime bill and wrote part of the crime bill. We're talking about a guy who supported NAFTA and the Patriot Act. And like his record as a senator is a deeply, deeply conservative Democrat and a corrupt Democrat. So I expected nothing at all. But then when he got into office, like, I was genuinely pleasantly surprised to see he did some student loan debt reduction. He did the $1,400 stimulus checks. He said it was going to be $2,000. That was a lie, but we got $1,400, which was half decent. In the Inflation Reduction Act, they overruled the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court said the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, is not allowed to do environmental protection. And so Biden and the Democrats slipped it into the IRA that we're redefining carbon emissions as a pollutant. So now the EPA can regulate it again, basically saving the entire fight against climate change by that one simple procedural trick, which was super base, one of the most base things I've ever seen any Democrat in the modern era do. He raised the minimum wage for federal employees and federal contractors through executive order, which is about 400,000 workers to $15 an hour. I definitely didn't expect him to do that. I didn't expect him to do project labor agreements, which 200,000 union workers get higher wages as a result of that. I didn't expect him to onshore 200,000 jobs when Trump had offshored hundreds of thousands of jobs. I didn't expect him to do even the mild gun reform that he did, where we have like some funding for red flag laws and we got rid of the boyfriend loophole. So if you have like a domestic abuser boyfriend, that you can legally take their guns now if they're a threat. I didn't expect, Ketanji Brown Jackson, I think, is a great Supreme Court justice. She was put on the court. We have the NLRB is genuinely pro-labor. We wouldn't have seen this increase in Amazon unionization and Starbucks unionization if it wasn't for that. He pulled out of Afghanistan, which I thought was super based, and then he actually told the media to suck his nuts as he did it when they were like flipping out over it. And he took a hit in the polls as a result of it because they hit him so fucking hard on that, and he went down in the polls. But he pulled out and said, "No, I'm not going to go back in." Now we can talk about all the the negative things, like he's fucking starving Afghanistan right now via sanctions, and he did a drone strike that killed innocents on the way out of Afghanistan. And so I could do the whole spiel. Like, here's the 20 areas where he's wrong. Ripped up the Iran agreement, is not getting back into it. It didn't lift a finger for the public option or the PRO Act. Gave up on $15 minimum wage for the whole country. Bombed Syria, sent troops to Somalia. I could give you the pros and the cons, but my point here is $15 corporate minimum wage, billions of dollars for Made in America green jobs, which was part of the IRA, the PACT Act, which gave health care to toxic burn pit victims who are veterans, massively reducing the drone war. And he did all this stuff without a fucking supermajority. Obama had a supermajority, and he did like 40% of what Biden was able to do. So I look at that and I go, my purity test in 2020 was like, if I was convinced Joe Biden would just do a couple of the things that I support, just like one or two or maybe three at most, just like if I thought for sure he's going to get me victories on three things I like, then I would suck it up and vote for him. And my point back then was, I don't think he's going to fucking do it. Based on his whole career as a senator, I don't think he's going to do it. I think he's super goddamn conservative. But then now I look at it and I go, number one, I actually probably should have voted for him. I didn't. I actually didn't vote in 2020, but I kind of should have voted for him, number one. Number two, if it comes down to Trump versus Biden or DeSantis versus Biden, and I'm in Virginia, I think I would go cast a vote for Biden because for all the issues he has far surpassed my expectations. But now it complicates it even more because Cornel West is running, and I fucking love Cornel West, and he's way more in alignment with my politics. So if I was in New York, I probably would still vote for Cornel West and not for Biden. So anyway, tell me your thinking and why you're more or less convinced that it's the right thing to do to go Cornel West.
All right, gotcha. A lot to respond there.
Yeah, sorry about that spiel.
No, you're great. That's a lot of good stuff. So first of all, I do live in a safe state. I live in Missouri, which is 100% gonna go red. It does every year, at least during my lifetime. At one point, not so much, but nowadays, solidly red state. Joe Biden's not gonna win it. In my opinion, it's gonna go to the Republicans, no matter who I vote for. So I'm going to vote for Cornel West in the general election, despite acknowledging, and I think it is important for us lefties to acknowledge that, yes, Joe Biden is the lesser of two evils, and I would much rather him be president again than Donald Trump be president again. I think it's a huge red flag of a faux populist when you start hearing people like Jimmy Dore making the argument that actually Trump is the lesser of two evils, and he's
that is literally
less of a fascist.
Just to be clear, that is of all the things he said, that is by far and away the dumbest shit I've ever heard him say. And for Sam Cedar to chime in and say, I'll debate him, I was watching that like, if he doesn't want to do it, I'll fucking do it. I'll do it. Because that shit is, are you like, do you have any brain cells left to make that argument? Like, that's the thing I don't like. He's a narrative humper and he's a terminal contrarian. So he has his narrative, which is like, actually, Democrats are the bigger evil. And it's like, if you follow the news at all in modern day, you would know for sure that it's factually false. Or you do know that and you're lying because you're a narrative humper and you're sticking to your narrative no matter what. So anyway, sorry, I interjected there to show how pissed off I was at him over that.
And by the way, I think it's okay to reject the lesser of two evilism idea or that dynamic. If you say, okay, well, obviously Joe Biden is the lesser of two evils.
Correct,
but
yes,
I don't want to participate, and I'm going to cast a protest vote. That's fine, but don't fucking pretend that Trump is the lesser of two evils. That's ridiculous. So yeah, I do live in a safe state, and I would actually take it further than you, Kyle. You said if someone lives in a safe state, then you think it's totally fine to vote for a third party or Green Party candidate. I would actually go further than that. I would say if you live in a solidly red or solidly blue state and there's a Green Party candidate as good as Cornel West on the ballot, then you almost have no excuse not to vote for that candidate, right? Because if you're living in Missouri or California on the flip side of that, then your vote is meaningless, honestly. And let's be honest about the presidential election. Unless you live in like one of 6 or 7 states, the vote you cast for president is one of the most meaningless things you're ever going to fucking do. Because of the Electoral College, it doesn't matter, honestly, unless you live in fucking Georgia, right? At this point. So I think that's something that needs to be said. And I wish that more people would understand how meaningless their vote for president is, because if more people employed my logic of, well, if I live in a state that's definitely going to go red or definitely going to go blue, so therefore I might as well just vote for the Green Party. I think if more people realize that, then the Green Party by now would have reached that 5% threshold that is necessary to get federal funding. And that's another reason why I'm very committed to getting Cornel West to 5%. I think that, yes, ranked choice voting is massively, massively important, and that we do need to work on making that a reality before third party candidates can truly flourish. But I think almost equally important is getting the Green Party to 5% in a national election. That way they can get federal funding and matching funds. That'll make them a much more formidable force in the next general election. And also, I think that there is definitely a lot to be said about ranked choice voting. Zach and I are huge advocates of it. And I think it's hugely important for the third party movement. But if you do look at some previous examples of third party victories, one that Zach and I have studied is Jesse Ventura's election as a third party governor in Minnesota. It actually was him getting on the debate stage that really made a difference in that. He was far, far behind in the polls, losing to the Republican Norm Coleman and the Democrat Skip Humphrey, who were much more established politicians in the state of Minnesota. He was like far behind them, basically just considered like a joke candidate until there was debates. And then Jesse Ventura, through his ability to contrast his populist perspective with the corporate Democrat and the corporate Republican, it immediately changed, basically overnight after that debate. Now, obviously, not everyone is as talented and charismatic as Jesse Ventura, but I would argue that Cornel West comes pretty close. And if we could get a Ross Perot kind of situation where he is able to, crack 10, 15% in a general election poll and get on the debate stage, I think that would be huge. I mean, I think that would be a fucking earthquake. Like, people would immediately wake up and realize this is okay, go ahead.
Yeah, let me interject, because Ross Perot is actually the example I was going to bring up, which is the example of the most successful independent run for president at the national level. And he got, I believe the number was, I'm actually trying to look it up right now, but I think the number was
18%.
Yeah, I thought it was 19. Okay, 18% of the vote.
It's like 18 and change, but it's not quite 19.
But he got 0 electoral college votes. And also, it's widely agreed upon among historians that he's like the main reason why Bill Clinton won, was able to win, right? So in a weird way, that sort of makes the resistance liberal argument where it's like, okay, so do you want to hand it over to Trump by giving a significant chunk of the vote to a third-party candidate who's not going to win, and just sort of split the vote of anybody who's center or left of center and just hand all the right-wing votes over to one person? Because obviously Cornel West is on the left, so he's going to take more, in theory, from a Democratic candidate. So look, my point is this. I think we should, if you get rid of first-past-the-post voting and you do ranked choice voting and you get it tomorrow, I would literally be like a Green Party cheerleader. I would become like an evangelist for them. Because then, then you are, by definition, you're serious. Because even whether or not people believe in the idea of a spoiler or they don't, it almost doesn't matter, because it's all about the perception of people that there is a spoiler effect, right? And that's real, that people have a perception of it, even if it's true or not. And so, but if you do ranked choice voting, get rid of first past post voting, then you immediately get rid of any objection to having an independent candidate or a third-party candidate. And then I genuinely think overnight, the Green Party becomes more viable. The Libertarian Party becomes more viable. You could come up with some new party. You could run as an independent, and that would become more viable. So I guess my frustration is in this discussion, everybody always puts the cart before the horse. And I autistically am like, why are you putting the cart before the horse? Like, do it the other way. And then I'm there with you. But when you don't do it, it makes me feel like it's sort of delusional in a sense.
Well, can I take a crack at that one, Kyle?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that what it is, and this would be my pushback, right? Is just that, and maybe you have a different experience. I wonder if it's a little bit if more people are plugged in the DC area. But I feel like the reason that a lot of people put so much pressure on the every the 4 year cycle, I mean, of presidency is it's because that's when you get people's eye on the ball, and I do understand that you're playing with fire when you're dealing with a third party candidate and you're facing a guy like Donald Trump. But I think that the worry is that it would be infinitely more difficult because of how stressed out everybody is, because of how spread thin everybody is, and because the media machine already trains everybody and is incentivized to keep their eyes on the horse race, because that's a profitable mechanism. I think a lot of people just feel like it can be harnessed to get a third party off of the ground in a way that it might not be able to be harnessed to get something like ranked choice voting off the ground. And I think that as a YouTuber, obviously we're completely jaded, right? But if you look at our, like Gavin one time, he spent like, I don't know, 12 hours in his room cutting this like, super in-depth like video essay about why ranked choice voting in Maine was super important, and everybody should take a look at it because this was like 2020. It was a hot button issue, and it got like 86 views. You start making clips about, the horse race, electoral politics, you get a lot more engagement. So I just think that's why people, decide to put the cart before the horse, is because otherwise, that horse might not move.
I also just think people
would
are
just
sick and
say
tired of waiting. But sorry,
that's
go
more
ahead.
of a, and I mean, I hear you, but that's more like the point that I'm making to do those things. It's more of like a procedural and administrative type argument. Not that it needs to be this big public show. We're going to get ranked choice voting, and we're going to get rid of first past the post voting. It's more of like, and this is where like knowing how to play politics really works. If you get people who are experts at this stuff and basically insider lobbyists at this stuff, and you can get them to talk to the right people, give the right campaign contribution. It's sort of like how with Wolfpack and Jank, and he started the whole thing, let's get money out of politics or whatever, and they're trying to get a constitutional convention, and they certainly hit a brick wall, but they got like, I don't know how many states it was, I'm just guessing, like 10 or 12 states or something like that, to actually pass at the state level a call for a constitutional convention to get money out of politics. Now, why was that the case? Because they were able to, like, they hired people who knew what they were doing, they knew what strings to pull, they knew who to talk to, and I think that, and because to do ranked choice voting and getting rid of first past the post voting, you could do it on a state-by-state basis. And so I think, like, you actually can get that done. And by the way, Andrew Yang, for my many flaws, for the many flaws he has, my many disagreements with him, when he started his Forward Party or whatever, one of their main things was, like, we want to get ranked choice voting everywhere. And, like,
right.
My counter argument to him was, like, you should make that, like, your only thing. Like, this should be a single issue attempt, and not even necessarily a political party. But, like, I guess my point is I don't think it's possible until you get rid of first past the post voting and you get ranked choice voting. So I just wish people were a little more serious about the steps to get this stuff accomplished. And I don't really see that happening. But I will say, I do sort of co-sign the idea that, in safe states in particular, it is a good, like, I think you should sort of cast
right.
the moral vote and the virtuous vote. I sort of agree with Gavin on that point. I just don't want to give people false hope about it, in the sense that I'm like, hey, with you doing this, it's going to, like, usher in the revolution. Because it's not. It's like, until we get rid of those structural things in the way, I kind of view it, is my final point, then I'll let you guys talk. I kind of view it as self-disenfranchisement, right? Like, Cornel West is running in the Green Party, or it was the People's Party, and thankfully he listened to his critics and went to the Green Party. That was a good move.
Yeah, retweet.
But he would be polling way higher if he ran as a Democrat. And I think everybody knows that, right? Like, when Jill Stein ran, she actually had a good run compared to other third-party runs. And one time she got, like 3% or something like that?
Yeah.
Which, again, is good for a Green Party candidate. Whereas Bernie Sanders got like 45% of the vote, and he's basically like a Green Party candidate who's running from within the Democratic Party. You know what I'm saying? So however rigged people think it is by the DNC against progressives, and by the way, there are a lot of structural hurdles there, and they do try to put their thumb on the scale, and they do influence it in a negative direction. But however rigged that is, it's like 10 times more rigged the third party way, and that's why I get frustrated. And honestly, I blame myself a little bit, because I was, I view politics in a very, like, principled morality, what's the right way to do it kind of way. And I sort of let that cloud my logical judgment in terms of how to actually win and actually get W's on the board. And so I sort of fed into this hysteria of like the third party stuff. And you have these people who have become totally nihilistic, and they'd rather like, you know, you hear people say like, I don't want to do, like, doing nothing is actually morally superior. And it's like, no, that's not accurate. Yeah.
Anyway, the accelerationists and all that stuff. 100%. And to be honest, you talk about the false hope that the Green Party represents. Yes, are there a couple like terminally online people that think that like voting for Cornel West 2024 is going to usher in the revolution and be the end of the duopoly? Like, yeah, I'm sure there's a couple of those people out there. I think, however, that the vast majority of people that vote Green in any election, myself included, do recognize it at this point to be a protest vote, with like the most hope being getting that candidate to 5%. I think that most people do recognize that. And I don't say protest vote to like demean the idea of third party voting, because I also have only ever voted for Green Party candidates. I've only been eligible to vote in 2 presidential elections, 2016 and 2020. I voted for the Greens in both those elections. So I'm definitely not above casting a protest vote. I mean, I fucking love to protest. So why not cast a protest vote? Like I said, casting a vote for president is already meaningless if you live in the state that I live in. So might as well cast a protest vote and, you know, sign off on a candidate that actually more aligns with my values. As far as the ranked choice voting thing, I'm 100% for ranked choice voting, and I completely agree with you, Kyle, that it would make the third-party movement so much stronger, so much more viable. The only question I'd have for you is your philosophy on that? Like, basically, until every single state has ranked choice voting, it's really not even worth engaging in the third-party movement or battle?
Well, no. Because like I said, I voted for about the same number of third-party candidates as I have Democrats in my life. And like I said, if you're in a safe state, I do kind of agree that it makes sense to vote for the Green Party for sure. Vote for a better candidate than a Democrat for sure. But I guess the reason why I always bring that up, and almost to the point of like autistically bringing it up, is that nobody brings up that point in the discussion. And it's like, so people seem to be deluding themselves into thinking like this is possible while still having first past the post voting and not having ranked choice voting. And I'm sitting there like, it's literally just not possible. Can we stop pretending here? Like, it's like we're all agreeing to play make-believe. And that's the thing that frustrates me.
I would also sign off on the fact that I don't think either Gavin and I would never argue that like Cornel West has a chance to become president, unfortunately, because of the reasons that you listed. But I just think that because he's superior in basically every measurable metric, that, you know, it's worthwhile to, you know, try and get him above 5%. I think it would be absolutely insane if he ever did perform as well as Ross Perot. I think that would be such a slap in the face to the Democratic Party that they might actually have to get their act together. You know, clearly they did not learn
they'll just
anything.
demonize him. They'll just demonize him more. That's what'll happen.
I mean, maybe that's true. I don't know. It's honestly, it's so fucked because I agree with you, Kyle, right? But I feel like that's kind of like, that's why we're like kind of in between a rock and a hard place.
But so if Cornel were to run as a Democrat, do you think he has a chance to win?
The primary? I mean, I think that at most that he would have a good chance of actually forcing them to debate.
I think he would have he would actually have a chance to win if he was in the Democratic primary. Yeah, but I will add this caveat because I think it's sort of important that it would have to be like just Biden versus Cornel West.
Right.
I think once you start complicating the field and you have Marianne and Cornel, which is like, you know, they're similar ideology, and then you throw in RFK, who's a psycho, but nonetheless, he's still going to take some number of votes, then it gets more complicated. But if it was 1v1, yeah, you definitely have a much better chance, especially because he's such a phenomenal orator. He's so charismatic that you become more undeniable. And Jacobin somebody for Jacobin wrote a piece recently that was just like, basically Cornel West should have ran as a Democrat. And like people were dunking on it. And I was like, why? Like, why are you? They're right. Like, he'd have a much better chance if he did that.
I would say not only would he have a much better chance if he did that, but he'd also have a much better chance as a third-party candidate as well if he did that and then did like the dirty break strategy in the event he lost. And I don't know how you feel about that, Kyle, but we've talked about it a bit on our show. The dirty break strategy is when you run as a progressive or a lefty in the Democratic primary. And then if they treat you unfairly, if they don't sanction debates, then after losing the nomination and, you know, after Joe Biden gets coronated as the nominee, then you say, no, I'm actually going to continue running for president just now as a third party candidate. This is what the Green Party wanted Bernie Sanders to do in 2016. You might remember after Bernie Sanders lost the nomination to Hillary Clinton, Jill Stein, who was the Green Party nominee, basically invited him onto the ticket and said, hey, come take over the ticket. I'll be VP. You can lead the Green Party ticket and continue your political revolution this way. Obviously, Bernie Sanders did not choose to go that route for reasons that I understand, by the way, but he did not choose to go that route. I think, however, that a similar strategy could really be successful for someone like Cornel West, because the problem with him just running as a Green Party candidate is that the Green Party primary doesn't even end for like almost a year. So he's missing out some of the time. He's still able to go on the news and campaign, don't get me wrong, but I think if he was participating in a Democratic primary for the next year, then that would give him a lot more attention that he could then capitalize on and build a serious movement and have real momentum as a Green Party candidate in the general election, after already kind of building that momentum as a Democratic Party candidate. And plus that would literally give him a shot at actually winning the Democratic nomination too. But I kind of doubt that would happen just because I know they would treat him unfairly, rig it, refuse to do debates, stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, one point that my mind keeps coming back to also in this conversation is that we need to break this fever that Democrats have of like normie Democratic voters, like sort of trusting mainstream media and like being cool with Democratic leaders and not seeing their flaws. Because that is definitely a difference between the Democratic base and the Republican base. The Republican base hates the media. They assume the media is lying and full of shit.